I don't often get particularly techy on this tech channel, but today is the day. Sort of. Earlier this week, I gave you an in-depth tour of this studio. If you missed it, I'll pop a link above. But during that tour, I revealed my fancy new Synology RT6600ax router, which was kindly sent to me by Synology. Now, a quick caveat, I know very little / nothing about routers, but just like you, hopefully, I care about decent Wi-Fi performance. Compared to the routers you receive from your broadband provider, the RT6600ax, I'm just going to call it the RT6600 now, just to make it a bit easier. But anyway, it is the kind of Rolls-Royce equivalent. And it might be the perfect solution if you don't fancy getting into the costly and complicated game of mesh networks. It also has one killer feature, which might just be the perfect backup solution for you. It was for me. Before the RT6600 arrived, I was rocking a bog standard router from my broadband provider, TalkTalk. As many of you probably know, the routers that we get from broadband providers aren't that good. And I had experienced a few Wi-Fi dropouts and just strange performance issues from that TalkTalk box. It's just a bit cheap. Now, the Synology RT6600 is a completely different beast. This is a Wi-Fi 6 compatible router that replaces the outgoing RT2600AC. And at $300, it may not sound cheap, but it's actually pretty well priced when you discover what it's capable of. Design-wise, it looks as utilitarian as you might expect from Synology. In fact, it's pretty brutal. This is clearly a router that means business. Those 6 antennas and the kind of no-messing functional black casing look like something out of a Ridley Scott film. It's got 6 antennas poking out of it, each of which support a 160 MHz channel and 5.9 GHz Wi-Fi. There's the usual bunch of gigabit Ethernet ports on the back and a USB-A port, which I'll come on to later. You'll be glad to hear that installing the RT6600 is really straightforward. If I can manage it, trust me, you can. And depending on the type of internet connection you have, you'll need to connect your RT6600 either to your existing router or a modem. I've got my Discord server to thank for kind of pointing me out how to do that on my setup. But basically, that meant connecting the TalkTalk router that I had already via one of its LAN ports to the RT6600's WAN port. From there, I simply installed the DS Router app on my iPhone and followed a really simple step-by-step installation process. Honestly, it was so easy, and within about 5 minutes, I was able to connect all of my devices to the RT6600 and use the TalkTalk internet connection from the old router. So this studio space is not large at all. There's a small room downstairs and this room upstairs. And while the walls are quite thick due to the age of this building, they're not asking much of a Wi-Fi connection. Regardless, I decided to do some Wi-Fi speed tests on my iPhone just to give you something to kind of think about, and the results were quite interesting. So upstairs in this room, the TalkTalk router delivered a 71 megabits per second speed, whereas the RT6600 achieved 73 megabits per second. So not a massive difference and no real surprise, bearing in mind how small this room is. Downstairs, it got a little bit more interesting. The TalkTalk delivered 62 megabits per second versus the RT6600's 71 megabits per second. So a nice little improvement. And like I say, the walls are quite thick here. So clearly the RT6600 had a better job of getting through downstairs. Then I stepped outside, and that is where it got really interesting. And this really is where the RT6600 starts to show its power. So standing outside with the studio door closed, the TalkTalk router delivered 4 megabits per second, whereas the RT6600 managed 56 megabits per second. That will make a massive difference in big buildings, big houses where you have lots of walls and lots of distance between yourself and the router. Clearly, that TalkTalk router ain't up to much, whereas the RT6600, okay, it's obviously a lot more expensive, you do get quite a bit for your money. But this Synology router has one other huge trick up its sleeve. The RT6600 comes with a built-in NAS functionality. Now, if you weren't aware, NAS stands for Network Attached Storage and means you can simply attach pretty much any external hard drive to this router's USB port and then access it either across your network or remotely via your laptop or via your smartphone. And normally you'd need a separate NAS, which Synology happens to make, and the router itself. So the fact that the RT6600 has the router and the NAS capability built in, and all you need to do is add an external hard drive, is actually quite mouthwatering. It's super easy to set up as well, so after you've connected the drive to that USB port, you simply format it within the router's operating system and give it a name. And helpfully, Synology give you lots of instructions for connecting to it either via your Mac, your Windows PC, or things like iOS and Android. This really is a convenient and pretty cost-effective way of getting into the NAS game without buying all the NAS hardware. It also makes the RT6600's price tag far easier to bear. And the other great news if you're a Mac owner is that you can use the RT6600's NAS functionality as a time machine backup. That's exactly what I've done. I've got a spare 6TB drive lying around, so I simply connected that to the RT6600, formatted it, gave it a name, and then set it up as a time machine drive. It was ridiculously easy. Once I set up the time machine setup in the RT6600 software, I simply went into macOS, chose that drive as the time machine backup. It just appeared there and done. I've now got a time machine backup for my 16-inch MacBook Pro whenever I'm in the studio, which is so useful. I've spoke a little bit about the built-in operating system for the RT6600. It's really good. It's called Synology Router Manager, or SRM for short. And I'm far from a networking expert, as I mentioned at the start of this video, but even I could navigate my way around SRM. And within SRM, you get access to the long list of features that the RT6600 is capable of. For instance, you can run up to 5 separate networks with the RT6600 and configure different firewall rules and access policies for each one. That's something that could be particularly useful in an office or perhaps a commercial application, but you may want to use it at home as well. So if you've got security cameras that use Wi-Fi, but you want to keep them on a separate Wi-Fi network, you can do that with this router. There's also a traffic control section in there as well, which enables you to monitor and distribute bandwidth as you see fit across your network. And that could be quite handy if you have lots of devices connected and certain devices require more bandwidth than others. I have a feeling parents will love this router as well. With the safe access feature, you can manage internet usage times, you can set specific times of use and even usage quotas for certain people. You can also filter out inappropriate content and rely on integrations with YouTube's safety mode and Google's safe browsing. There's also a built-in VPN, which has more VPN features than I've ever seen anywhere else, and that includes the ability to create VPN access to your own internal websites or devices without any additional software or complication. Again, very useful for small businesses. And if you want to get really fancy and you have a particularly big building to fill with Wi-Fi, the RT6600 can also be set up as its own mesh network. Now, I haven't covered every single feature in the RT6600ax because I don't understand a lot of them. If you know me, you know that I'm not particularly deeply techy with stuff, but I do appreciate smart, clever, easy to use, powerful tech. And the RT6600, when it comes to wireless networking and Wi-Fi connections, is the best thing I've ever used in that regard. But I wanted to check out this router for 2 reasons. The first one was that Wi-Fi 6 capabilities. I've never used that before, and if my tests are anything to go by, it's pretty impressive. And the other is that built-in NAS functionality. Now, I do have some NAS plans on the way, which I'll reveal very soon. Make sure you subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss out on that. But just as a quick way of getting into that NAS game without spending a shed load of money on lots of NAS hardware and stuff, just having that RT6600, a spare hard drive connected to it, and that really simple to use SRM software, within minutes, you're up and running with a really good NAS system. And if you do know your stuff about networking, there's probably nothing within the RT6600 that you can't customize. And that leads me to the conclusion that at $300, I think the RT6600ax is a bit of a bargain for anyone who wants a super strong Wi-Fi network without mesh networking and the ability to get into the NAS game without spending a fortune. Now, if you want to see more of what goes on behind the scenes in this studio, keep watching for a link to a recent studio tour video that I did. See you next time.